And as it turned out, police discovered that one of those 9/11 victims shared DNA with the Midtown Jane Doe from 1969, that teenage girl found encased in concrete 3 decades beforehand. Earlier, I spoke with the NYPD detective Ryan Glas, who has worked on the case since 2022. Detective Glas, thank you so much for being on with me on this story. It's really a remarkable connection that has been made to identify a decades-old Jane Doe. Can you walk me through the simple way that the connection was made between the 1968 victim and the 9/11 victim?
Through the investigative genetic genealogy, we explored the maternal side of Jane Doe's family tree and discovered that a woman had submitted a DNA sample to the medical examiner's office with the hopes of IDing her daughter who passed away during those horrific attacks on 9/11. From that mother's sample, we were able to get the identity of Midtown Jane Doe.
It's so remarkable, and almost by happenstance that this second tragedy would have hopefully, led to solve this first tragedy. I do want to ask you about the ring that the victim, that Jane Doe, was wearing when her skeletal remains were found encased in the concrete. I believe it had PMCG on the ring, and that matches up with the victim's name. Can you tell me who she was, what her name was, and a little bit about her?
Yes, initially in the investigation, that ring was discovered, and the PMCG ring matches up to Jane Doe's identity, which is Patricia Kathleen McGlone.
At the time, there was no way to find out what that PMCG meant on the ring because, as I understand it, this teenager hadn't been reported missing, hadn't been reported as a runaway, and so it was as though she just never existed to the police in New York.
That is correct. The ring was a substantial lead in the investigation back in 2003. The original detective, Detective Gerard Garner, did a tremendous amount of work and tracked down any missing person or arrested person with those initials within the 50 states. And that came up dry as a lead, and that's when the case went cold.
On the screen right now is the evidence photograph of the skeleton, the actual skull and some of the bones that those construction workers discovered. Can you explain to me a little bit about what happened when that skull appeared, what the next moves were, and how everything began to evolve in this cold case since that skull appeared?
So on February 10, 2003 is when her remains were discovered, cemented within the concrete of the basement of a building, and workers were demolishing the building for renovation and came across her remains. She was wrapped in carpeting and she was hogtied. The medical examiner and anthropology unit responded and deemed that she was a 5'2" female, possibly 17 to 19 years old, and that she died from strangulation.
So as I understand it, even though she was a young teen, even though she was a runaway and hadn't been in contact with her family, she was married. So perhaps she ran away to get married. I did sort of the math, and she'd be, I think, around 73 years old right now. If she married someone slightly older, he'd be in his late 70s, perhaps. Do we know who she married and if that person is still alive?
The investigation led us to discover a marriage certificate with this individual's name. And my investigation also led by looking through her school records at the middle school that she last attended, provided a date of her marriage. And this individual, I can say, is connected to the building, 301 West 46th Street. From what I was able to gather from the school record and just based on the marriage certificate and affidavit that was obtained, there was a date of birth provided, which was significantly older for a 16-year-old to marry. But we're still trying to determine the significance and validate if the information from what we have is correct.
Well, that makes it so much harder. I mean, even if he's 5 years older, you're getting up near 80 at this time to try to track someone down. I wish you the best of luck, and I sure hope that this case gets solved. If the person who's responsible for doing this is no longer alive, will we ever see true justice in this case?
Yes, of course. Every victim is a child of somebody, and the most important piece is to have an identity to the victim, which we have. And the next leg in the investigation is obviously to track down who did this horrific crime to her. And I think we'll be successful in that.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.